عملتوها كده. Seems like we are in Bascha already. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. First time we met, we had decided that in this meeting we will be discussing what it means to live our orthodoxy in a fulfilling way, and that's why we called this meeting Paradosis. And as I told you, that Paradosis means tradition in Greek language. And then we agreed to speak today about Paradosis. What is our tradition? What's our definition of tradition? And how to understand our tradition, etc. But however, 2 weeks ago, our father departed from this world to be joined to the saints in heaven. And that's why, under the new circumstances, we have decided to change this meeting today to make it a special meeting to remember our Holy Father, whose service to the church has affected all of us. You can't imagine the outpouring of love, not only from Christians but from non-Christians. When I went to Egypt, not even when I arrived at Egypt, even when I was in the plane, because I took Egypt Air, the people in the plane, how they came to us and expressed they offered their condolences, and they said great things about His Holiness. His Holiness was a man loved by everyone. And I'm going to talk to you a lot about His Holiness today. But one thing I thought about, and I want to share this with you, is besides calling this meeting Paradosis, we want to consider ourselves children of His Holiness Pope Shenouda. And the idea is to live by his teachings, to begin to read more his books in a deeper way, and extract the teachings that he wanted to teach us. He loved you very much as youth, as young people. And I always say that the first thing that His Holiness wanted me to make sure of when I came to the United States, first thing he said to me after he ordained me bishop, even before he started to talk to me about this place or the clergy monthly meeting that he wanted me to hold for the clergy, first thing he said, I want you to go and take care of the youth. Can you imagine that? This shows you how much he believes in the youth. And you know how he said, church without youth, the church without a future, right? In the memorial service we held last Sunday, it was a week ago, the Catholic representative, if you remember, said that he is amazed how our church is full of young people. And I feel that the reason why our church is full of young people is because the vision His Holiness had regarding the youth service, and that's why the church serves the children from a young age, and that's why when they grow up they have this love for the church when they become youth. See, so he is such an amazing person. His Holiness is unrepeatable. Is one of a kind. And we should all thank God that we lived during the time of Pope Shenouda. Because many generations after us will read the history of the Coptic Church and read about a great Pope that lived in the 20th and 21st century. They will only read about him as we read about Saint Athanasius and about Saint Cyril and how great they were. Okay? But we are thankful to God that we saw him, we took his blessings, we kissed his holy hands, we saw him teach, and we were close to him. We learned a lot from him. Such a great blessing. I personally thank God because I was very close to him, and I learned a lot from him. And as I said in the memorial service, I just wish I can be even 1% of what he was, because 1% of what he was is a lot. Okay, so do you all agree to call ourselves this meeting, besides Paradosis, call ourselves children of His Holiness Pope Shenouda? How many agree? Any disagreements? Okay. There is a program today. I wish to follow the program, but before we start the program, I want to tell you that someone just before the meeting gave me a picture that he did for His Holiness, one with his black clothes, and on the other side with his liturgical vestments. So we're going to stick a piece of handkerchief that His Holiness used to use as a blessing. You know, in the Bible, there's a verse that says that the handkerchiefs of Saint Paul cast out the demons and healed the sick. So it was a blessing, right? So when we consider that anything that His Holiness touched or used is a blessing now. So I'm going to stick a piece of that on each picture. We'll give it to you in the end. Okay? One last thing before we begin. I want to introduce to you Father Mauritius. How many of you know Father Mauritius? You know him. How do you know him from? From CYC. Very good. I saw Father Mauritius many times. And what was he doing in CYC? About the liturgy, right? So I saw him. I didn't know when he was doing that, but the few times that I was flicking the channel thing, he happened to be explaining the liturgy. And because Father Mauritius went to Australia when he was very young, you know, like there were three friends in the same church: Bishop Angelos, Bishop Suriel, and Father Mauritius. They were from the same church in Australia, and the three of them went to Australia very young. They grew up in Australia, so their first language is English language, so they can communicate with the youth very well. So we welcome Father Mauritius, and hopefully he will have a chance sometime during this program to speak to us. Okay? So who's in charge of the program? Okay.
So thanks for coming. I think, God willing, the way we're going to do it from now on is it'll always start with excuse me, a spiritual word by His grace, and then we're going to open it up to a question and answer session. And the question and answers can be either submitted, during the meeting itself, or submitted prior to an email that we have set up, which you guys should have seen on either the emails or the Facebook group. But if you want it, you can go to Kurlis Bernebe and he'll set it up. Okay. Then after the question and answer session, there's going to be a video session where we show you guys a video that's supposed to open up like discussion on a certain topic, and usually that video will relate to whatever it is we're discussing that day. So today, for example, the video is going to relate to the youth and His Holiness Pope Shenouda. And then finally, we're going to have fellowship time with each other where we go to eat, and then, God willing, we'll spend some fellowship time with His grace till whenever. And yeah, till it's time for work. And so for this meeting, we're going to do a quick video right now on just kind of giving you an idea of where this meeting is going to be going, what we're going to discuss throughout the year, which again is up to His grace, but we just put some examples that we found on traditions, then a word by His grace, then question and answers, then the video, then fellowship. So it's a packed day. That's why it's not happening very frequently, because there's a lot that goes into it, but hopefully if it's successful, we can maybe do it more frequently, inshallah.
The word Coptic traces its roots to the age of the pharaohs. Egypt's pharaonic name was Hekupta, meaning house of the energy of Ptah. Ptah being the religious name for Memphis, ancient Egypt's capital city. This in turn evolved into the Greek name Aegyptos, and then the Arabic name Kipt or Gipt, from which we derived the names Egypt and Copt. Therefore, the words Coptic and Egyptian are synonymous. Over time, the words Coptic and Christian have also become interchangeable. The Coptic language is still used today in the church's worship and hymns. Its letters evolved from the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and currently bear many similarities with Greek. In fact, the Coptic alphabet is comprised of the 24 letters of the Greek alphabet, and 7 letters unique to the Coptic language.
The word Orthodox literally means straight opinion. The Orthodox Church has kept her same Christian faith and teachings since the time of Jesus Christ and His followers, the Apostles. The Orthodox Church has a direct connection to the early Christian Church. The sources of Orthodox Christian teaching have passed from one generation to the next through both oral and written tradition. These sources include the Holy Bible, ancient liturgies, rites, and prayers, the Acts of the Christian martyrs and saints, the writings of the early Church Fathers, and the very spirit of the Church's life.
Today, the Coptic Church is marked by spiritual practices that aim at bringing her members into unity with and the knowledge of truth in Jesus Christ. These practices include fasting, prayer, and the sacramental life of the Church. Liturgical prayer is a very important part of Orthodox worship. The word liturgy literally means the work of the people. Therefore, the Divine Liturgy is the work of God's people and invites the participation of all. It is comprised of a system of rites and rituals that include prayers, supplication, chants, and readings from the Holy Bible. At the height of the Divine Liturgy is the consecration of bread and wine to the true body and true blood of Jesus Christ. The faithful partake of Holy Communion, the Eucharist, to unite with Jesus Christ and with one another. The Coptic Church also has a very rich and ancient musical tradition. All worship services are chanted. Some melodies are said to date from the time of the pharaohs, while others have a strong Byzantine influence. Among them is the Hymn of Peace, or Epuru in Coptic. This tune was once chanted to welcome and receive the pharaohs. While the melody has remained the same since ancient times, Its lyrics now reflect the Coptic Christian faith. Lastly, a visitor to the Coptic Church will find it adorned with icons, which are images of Jesus Christ and the saints. Unlike pictures or portraits, icons are not meant to capture natural or physical characteristics, but rather the spiritual. Deep theological teachings are conveyed in the features and colors of icons. Icons are used in Coptic worship and often called windows to heaven. The Orthodox faithful do not worship the icon itself. Rather, the faithful use icons in prayer to remember the lives and events depicted, asking for the prayers and intercessions of the saints.
Okay, so that's it. We just wanted to show you guys a quick video that would introduce maybe some of the traditions that we may talk about. Just one last thing I wanted to mention. The point of this meeting is to really be interactive, whether it be through the question and answers or through the video session. One of the big goals of the meeting is for us to, interact with each other and also interact with Siyana more than we maybe usually would have the chance to. So we should all take advantage of this meeting to do that. And then I think now Siyana can give his word.
Yeah, so thank you for preparing this video. Actually, it's although it's very brief, but yet it's very powerful and has a lot of information. You may know or not know, but presently I'm studying in Boston, in Holy Cross, the Greek Orthodox Seminary. And you would be proud when you hear them speak very highly of the Coptic Church. And for many centuries they used to call us monophysites, right? So now, whenever the word monophysite comes up, they say the Coptic people are not monophysites. They just discovered that after 14 centuries, that we are not monophysites. And they speak very highly of our saints, especially Saint Athanasius and Saint Cyril the Great. And they speak about the Coptic Church as a church that have kept the faith. And even they say sometimes that we have kept the faith and the traditions more than them. So they say the Coptic Church has preserved a pure version of the original Saint Basil's liturgy. The liturgy that we use almost every Sunday, Saint Basil. So they say we have an older version which is more pure than what they added prayers to it. But we have the original one in our church. So when you hear someone who's not Coptic speaking very highly of the Coptic Church, then you become very proud. So most definitely we'll be speaking about a lot of things that we have been practicing in the church, but we may not understand in full what they are. My goal is that we live our Orthodox faith with understanding. We don't just do things because we are told to do them, or because we grew up doing certain things. But we need to understand why we do what we do. Because the idea is not just to do it, but to benefit from it. So hopefully, we will, as we progress, we will understand more of what our church teaches. And also, we will study sayings of the fathers. We will have books to read, and we come and discuss those books. we can have a discussion, an open discussion in any topic, any question you want to ask, why we do certain things, etc. And I believe that this meeting is going to be very fruitful, and many leaders who the church will come out of this meeting. Okay. So we will focus today on His Holiness, and I want you to ask me questions, because if I start talking I will take very long time, because I have a lot to say, but I don't know where to start and what you really want. Maybe if you help me by asking questions, I can tell you what you want to know about His Holiness, and maybe this is a better idea. What do you think? Just want me to talk to you about His Holiness, or you want to ask questions? Inside, you mean the heart, or inside His room? His Holiness has one of the purest hearts I have ever met in my life. You know how the Lord Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." His Holiness really had a pure heart. So, because of His purity, or the purity of His heart, he is a genius. You know, he has very high IQ, beyond what you can imagine. Like he almost memorized the whole Bible. One time, you know how he always, whenever he had a meeting with anyone, he was the one who led the discussion because of his great knowledge, no matter who he sat with. So one time he had visitors here, and then after they left, he said to him, "Your Holiness, I am amazed at how much," you know, he used to memorize a lot of poems. He said to him, "Your Holiness, when did you learn all that?" قلت له انت عقدتني يا سيد. تتقال ازاي دي بالانجلش بقى؟ نعم. Give me a complex. I don't know if this translation is accurate. Anyway, so I said to him, when did you learn all that? He said, "If I read a poem and I like it, I memorize it. That's it." So sometimes when you need to memorize something, you keep repeating it many times until you memorize it. But he said, "If I like it, I will memorize it right away." So, and then he said, "I remember, or I memorized 6,000 lines of poems." Not 6,000 whole poems, 6,000 lines. Can you imagine 6,000? It's a lot. But as much as he was really a genius, yet he was a very simple man. And I haven't seen anyone in my life that combines both. A person can be either a genius, but his emotional contact with other people is very low. You understand this? So they say the IQ and the EQ, intelligent quotient. So when the intelligent quotient is very high, then the emotional quotient is very low. Usually, there is a reverse relationship, and the vice versa is true. But this is the only person I met in my life who has a very high intelligent quotient, and humanly speaking, at a personal level, he's very close to you, and he has. So one of the priests told me today. I called him on my way back from the church I was praying at, and then he said to me something funny. He said, "I thought that His Holiness only loved me personally as a priest. I felt that personal touch, but now I hear all the priests talking about how they felt the same way." So I said to him, that's because His Holiness had a lot of love that he could give to everybody, and everyone could feel that he's very special. So he was very close, and everyone had a personal touch with him. So anyone who came close to His Holiness felt very special. And he gave very special attention to each person that he was close to. Right? But at the same time, he was a genius. Unbelievable. Until the last minute of his life. So he was almost 89 years old. You know, at that age, people tend to lose some memory and forget, and they're not really focusing. But he was sharp till the last day. You know, every time when I became bishop, and then I call him just to discuss any topic, then he will ask questions, and I didn't expect him to ask those questions. So then I started to, prepare myself very well every time I call him. Then, as he was getting older, he got into his 80s, but still, until the last day, I was very prepared every time I called His Holiness. And, I try to expect what kind of questions he will ask. Otherwise, he would surprise me with some questions that I'm not prepared for. And sometimes he did, although I prepared myself very well, but yet still he would ask me some questions that I wasn't prepared for. So, to answer your question, Bishoy, you wouldn't get tired and bored no matter how long you sat with His Holiness. To the extent that sometimes I imagined what heaven would be like with Jesus. See? So if I say, if we are enjoying the company of His Holiness that much, and when he came here and everyone came to take his blessings, and he would sit with us until sometimes after midnight, and no one wants to leave. Right? And then after that, sometimes I went in with him, and then we continued for another hour or two. And every time I saw him, as if I haven't seen him. I enjoyed his company very much. So I understood how eternity would be like with Christ. We'll never get bored. If I didn't get bored by spending time with His Holiness, so most definitely, I will never get bored by spending eternity with the Lord Jesus in heaven, right? Also, His Holiness was always a teacher. He took every opportunity to teach something. Every chance he had in any encounter or anything that happens, he would provide a teaching or a verse from the Bible. And Bayanis used to say, just push the button. So he would remember a saying for one of the church fathers, or he would remember a verse that pertains to any situation. A very spiritual man. He's truly a great blessing, and I thank God that I had this chance of meeting with His Holiness and spending time with him. What else do you need to know? Yes. Okay, thank you. His Holiness was very active as a bishop before he became Pope in 1971. He was very active in the ecumenical movement, and he represented our church in some ecumenical meetings, such as Pro Oriente. This was before he became Pope. And actually he is the one who wrote the formula that the Catholic Church agreed on. The theological formula that there was an issue of Christology from 451, right? Chalcedon, you know that history? Do I need to explain, or you understand? Chalcedon 451. What was the problem? The problem was the nature of Christ, Christology. They were influenced, the Eastern Orthodox and at that time the Catholic, they were influenced by the teachings of Nestorius. So they spoke of two natures, right? And at that time, two natures meant two persons, because the idea was there is no nature without a person. So when you speak of two natures, then you imply two persons, right? But then the theologians started to speak about it's not necessarily every time you speak of a nature, you speak of a person, then they spoke of two natures and a single person. This is the theology of the Eastern Orthodox up until this day. Two natures, single person. But we insist that, according to the teachings of St. Cyril, which they agree with, St. Cyril said, Meaphysis, who knows that formula? Meaphysis, to Theologo, Sesarcumeni. Right? Meaphysis, to Theologo, Sesarcumeni, which means one incarnate nature of the Word of God. This is the teaching of St. Cyril. And we both agree on the teachings of St. Cyril. So, in 451, our Pope, what's his name? Pope Dioscorus. Or we call him Saint Dioscorus, because we consider him as a confessor. He really suffered for the sake of the faith. He was deposed not for a heresy, but because he did not attend the council. Okay? So, that's when the schism occurred in 451. From 451 until 1970, that's when that Pro Oriente meeting took place, or maybe 71, around that time. His Holiness wrote the formula that they agreed on and we agreed on. So, with the Catholic Church, we don't have a problem with Christology now. We both agree on what we believe the nature of Christ is. And when we speak of one nature, doesn't mean that we deny the other nature, like Eutychus or the Eutychian heresy. Right? So, what do we mean by one nature? It means that when the two natures united together, we can no longer separate them. They are one nature, means united together. It's a composite nature. Right? Not a simple nature, but a composite nature. Just like the human nature, our nature is spirit and flesh. Right? But the spirit and the flesh are united together in what is called human nature. It's one nature. Right? So, His Holiness wrote that formula. And then, after he became Pope, he put the unity of the Church as one of his main goals throughout his life. So there were meetings that took place in the monastery of Amba Bishoy and other meetings that took place in other parts to try and reunite all the Orthodox. And I think around 1991, an agreement took place between the Oriental Orthodox family, which is our family, and the Eastern Orthodox, which is the other family. And then once the theologians agreed on this matter, then the next step was for the Holy Synod of each church to recognize that agreement and to sign their acceptance of the agreement that took place between the theologians. Our church was the first church to sign the agreement. Our Holy Synod, presided by His Holiness Pope Shenouda, was the first church to sign that agreement in the first Holy Synod's meeting after that agreement took place. Unfortunately, some other churches did not accept that agreement. Greek church did not accept, especially Mount Athos, who are very stubborn. Let me tell you that in one of the classes, maybe Steve, we are together in studying in the Holy Cross. So tell them, because there is a witness here. What was the name of that bishop from France? كان اسمه ايه؟ مش مهم. What did he say about their bishops?
Oh, Father Dragis?
Remember that bishop who came from France a couple of weeks ago? I gave a witness.
Oh, saying how they're all, like a bunch of the bishops in the Orthodox Church now are like really closed off to ecumenism and spreading unity, exactly what the question was asking. So this is a bishop in the Greek Orthodox Church talking about the other bishops of the Greek Orthodox Church, saying that they're stuck up, so to speak.
كويس انه افتكر. Yeah, so that bishop, he was disagreeing with what the other Greek Orthodox bishops were doing, because they are against unity. And he was saying that there is no reason why we should not reunite. But because they have this old history and background in their minds, they don't want to move forward. But His Holiness, you know, one good thing about His Holiness, that he had future vision. He was not stuck in the past. He really had that future vision by which he led the church. So you would see bishops or priests, if you speak to them about certain issues, they will be really, you feel that they are stuck somewhere, they can't move on. But His Holiness had that future vision by which he could see things happening in the future in a certain way. And that's why he led the church in an amazing way. And I personally attended, when I was in the monastery, some ecumenical dialogues that took place, and I listened to His Holiness while he was talking. And one time he said there was it wasn't a dialogue, but I think it was just an ecumenical gathering in which they were speaking about Saint Athanasius. And then he said that, how come you say that we are monophysites? Which nature do we deny? Is it the human nature? It can't be, because who wrote a book defending the humanity of Christ? Saint Athanasius. What's the name of the book? On the Incarnation. Who defended the divinity of Christ? Saint Athanasius. In which book? No, not on the Incarnation. Contra Arianos, against Arius, because Arius denied the divinity of Christ. So it was a Coptic Pope who defended the divinity and the humanity of Christ. So we cannot be the ones to deny any of the natures. And then at the end they said to His Holiness, it's amazing that we see a patriarch who is also a theologian. And then His Holiness answered and said, we are here to speak about Saint Athanasius, who was a patriarch and a theologian. Very smart. He was very quick to respond. Does this answer your question, Mina? So His Holiness was really active, and he was hoping to see the Christian unity happening. And let me tell you one thing about that question, because it's very important. You know how the you know, there is sometimes a protocol on who sits where and what's the order of the church. In the Second Ecumenical Council, 381, they said the first chair belongs to Rome, because Rome is the capital, of course, and then the second one for Constantinople, because Constantinople is second Rome after the capital changed from Rome to Constantinople. And then Alexandria comes number 3. So the first two are, because they are the capitals, then they take the first and second position. So really Alexandria is the first, right? Because if you exclude the two others because of what they are, then you have Alexandria. Anyway, متعصب شوية. But then His Holiness said, we don't care if we sit in the last seat, as long as we are united in faith. Do you understand? So, we agreed, by the way, for those who came later, that we are going to call ourselves the children of His Holiness Pope Shenouda, and to live by His Spirit. Right? So one thing I want you to understand about His Holiness and His Holiness's teachings is that he didn't care about honor, where to sit or what kind of honor, as long as we keep the right faith, the sound faith which Christ delivered to the church. Who remembers what I told you last time about what St. Athanasius said about paradosis? How did he define paradosis? How did he define tradition? St. Athanasius. It is first what Christ gave, what the apostles preached, and what the fathers kept. I want you to all to memorize that. What is tradition? Number one, what Christ gave. Can we all memorize that? What's tradition? It's what Christ gave, what the apostles preached, what the fathers kept. One more time. What's the tradition? It is what? One more time, but please everyone say, I want you to understand. There are things that we will memorize in this meeting. It will be, everyone has to memorize that, because this is our orthodoxy now. We have to understand. What's the tradition? It is, right away, you will say, it is what? في جيبي. انت عايز المنديل تاني ولا لا؟ معايا واحد. طب خد بس حد تعرف تقطع زي الانترو عشان السايز لازم حد يمسك. So His Holiness didn't really care when they were talking about the protocol and where to sit and what will be the order. He said, let us be in the last seat. Doesn't matter. As long as we agree on matters of faith. So, this is something that we need to understand as Orthodox, and something that we need to live by. Is the most important thing is the faith of the church. The Orthodox faith. It's what Christ gave. And then Christ said, when the Son of Man comes in His second coming, will He find faith on earth? What does this mean? Will He find the faith on earth? Doesn't only mean that He will find believers who believe in Him, but will He find the right faith, the sound faith, the Orthodox faith, which He gave to the church. So it is really up to us to maintain that faith, to keep that faith, to live by that faith. See? So someone else had their hand up. In the desert? This is something that Abuna may be able to answer better, because he spent a lot of time with His Holiness after in the desert. You mean before he became a bishop? No one will know anything about that, but I can tell you what he said. I'll tell you what he said himself. Yeah. So he said, the first night that I went out to live by myself in the desert in solitude, first initially he lived 2 kilometers, which is about just over a mile away from the monastery, and then he went to a further place that's further away, about 8 miles away from the monastery. So in the desert, when it's really dark and really quiet, it's really scary. So he said to himself, now the devils are going to appear to me. So what did he decide to do? He said, now I'm going to say the tasbihah, and I'm going to say the magma', the magma', the commemoration of the saints, so that the devil will know that I have many friends, and they will not come near me. So he said, so that they will know that my friends are many. So he will say, he will call on Virgin Mary. How the magma is full of angels and saints. And then he said, and then they never came. He was disappointed. So this was his first night. But another thing he told us, that he considered, he said that God saved me from death 6 times in my life. Okay? One of them, when he was preparing his cell in the desert. It's actually a cave. It's not a. It's like like you make your own cave in a mountain or sort of. So he was working during the day, and then midday when it's really hot, then he rests for a couple of hours until sun goes down a little bit, and then he continues working. So normally he would he would sleep for 2-3 hours when it's really hot. How it is in Egypt in the desert. So that day he went to sleep, and he said after 10 minutes I woke up for no obvious reason. He just woke up, and there was a scorpion going towards His Holiness, and it almost bit him. And of course he was away in the desert, and if that scorpion bit him, then he would not, there would be no chance to save him, right? So that was one incident that happened in the desert. He used to read a lot. I know that Bishop Sarabamon, who is the abbot of the monastery of Amba Bishoy now, used to bring him a camel loaded with books. And then he gives him the books, the new books, and then he takes the books that he had already read. So he did that that's why he was very knowledgeable. So he used to read a lot. And then one day the camel ran away. Did you hear that story? One day the camel ran away. And then what does Amba Sarabamon do? Then he started running after the camel. But the camel is very fast. Then he followed the footsteps of the camel until he found that the camel was standing still, and another camel that Amba Sarabamon describes as a huge white camel standing in front of it, and then the camel could not go anywhere. That's so he took the camel and came back. What does this mean? No one knows. What kind of camel it is? No one knows. قدسك فاكر حاجة تانية حصلت في الديزرت؟ بس ده ما كانش في الديزرت نفسها. But His Holiness lived many years in the desert by himself, and he didn't came to the monastery that often because he preferred to live a life of solitude. But then Pope Kyrillos, when he became Pope, he asked him to come and be his secretary, especially that His Holiness Pope Shenouda was very knowledgeable in the canons of the Church, and Pope Kyrillos, as a new patriarch, he needed some help. So, against his will, he had to come and lived maybe a few months with His Holiness Pope Shenouda. Then he returned to the monastery. And then, one day, there was a delegation from I don't know which country that came. They wanted to take some pictures inside the monastery of El Syrian, in which Pope Shenouda was a monk. What was his name? Antonius, right? That's why he loved Saint Antonius. So, because it was during one fast, I don't remember which one, and the monastery was closed at that time. So, His Holiness, who was in charge of the visitors, he decided that he will not let them in. But he only took 2 or 3 to take the pictures. So, he doesn't break the rules that the monastery is closed for the fast or during the fast. And at the same time, he let them in to take the ones who will take the pictures. He let them in because they were big in number. So when Pope Kyrillos heard that monk Antonius refused to let them in, because Pope Kyrillos at that time sent a letter with them so that they can enter the monastery. So he said, "Where is that monk, disobedient monk, Antonius? I want him to come and appear in front of me right now." Then the abbot of the monastery of El Syrian, what was his name? Bishop Theophilus. He said to Pope Shenouda, his name was Monk Antonius, "What did you do? What have you done? The Pope wants to see you." He said to him, "I will tell you what's the best thing to do. Go and tell him we punished that monk, and we said to him, you cannot go out of your cell. This way, I will be happy because I love to be in my cell, and the Pope will be pleased that I was punished." So the bishop said to him, "No way." He said he has to come by himself. "You have to come with me right now." You know, His Holiness Pope Shenouda, he never wanted to go out of the monastery. But then Bishop Theophilus, he promised him, he said to him, "You will come with me, and I promise that we will return the same day." Okay. So they went to Cairo. It was the custom of the monks to make a matanya before the patriarch. So he makes the matanya, and then Pope Kyrillos tells him, "What have you done?" Then he explains to him, "Your Holiness, they were pleased. They came and took all the pictures they wanted, etc." So Pope Kyrillos asks him, "Why you don't want to come and work with me?" Then he says, "You know, I haven't matured yet. I haven't yet even become a monk in a humble way." So Pope Kyrillos begins to examine him. what did Saint Isaac the Syrian say about humility? Pope Kyrillos loves Saint Isaac the Syrian because he was, he was a bishop. Then he decided he cannot be a bishop because he was an ascetic monk and he didn't want to become a bishop. So Pope Kyrillos loved him because Pope Kyrillos was also an ascetic monk. And he loved and memorized his teachings and his sayings. So Pope Shenouda said to him, knowing that Pope Kyrillos loves Saint Isaac the Syrian, he said humility, we can only speak of humility as belonging to God because God humbled himself, taking the form of man. He is God, but he humbled himself. He emptied himself from his divine glory and took the form of man. That's why we can only speak of humility speaking about God. So Pope Kyrillos liked that. And then he said to him, why don't you come and work with me? He said to him, I haven't even become a monk yet. Anyway, and then he says to the bishop, the abbot, Bishop Theophilus, why you don't allow your children to come and work with me? Then the abbot replies, قالها لكم بالعربي وشوفوا هترجموها ازاي. قال ما اقدرش استغنى عن دوفر واحد فيهم. ترجم بقى دي ملهاش ترجمة. right؟ بس هات كده الجست يعني. لا ما اقدرش استغنى. ما اقدرش استغنى عن دوفر واحد فيهم. فاهمينها بالعربي؟ ها؟ لو حد مش فاهمها يترجم للي جنبه. ما اقدرش استغنى عن دوفر واحد فيهم. ها؟ This is literal translation. In English it doesn't. يعني I can't stand to let them out of my sight. ماشي. يعني كده يعني. It has no English translation. ما اقدرش استغنى عن حد فيه او عن دوفر حد فيه. Then Pope Shenouda, when he says that story, he says apparently they had agreed together what to do, but they are playing this game again. Anyway, so in the end of the meeting, what does the monk have to do before he leaves? Another matania, right? So now the monk Antonius makes another matania in front of Pope Kyrillos. Then Pope Kyrillos was tall, Pope Shenouda is short. فبيقول ايه, I was like a bird under his hands. ما قدرتش افلفص من تحت ايديه. I couldn't escape from underneath his hand. So he grabbed his head and said, I call you Shenouda, Bishop of Education. That's it. He was tricked. He grabbed his head. He could not escape. And he said, I call you Shenouda, Bishop of Education. Then he said to him, you have no absolution to leave the Patriarchate until Sunday. That was sometime during the week. Because Sunday is the day in which the bishop, you cannot ordain a bishop except on a Sunday. This is the canons of the church. So at night, on that same night, they were having dinner, and then the priests who were having dinner with him said, please, your grace, can you pray on the food so we can eat? And then he says, your grace? Then he realized that it is true, because his understanding of the canon of the church, or the canons of the church, that what is the ordination? The essence of the ordination is really the laying of the hands. So if you lay the hands and pronounce or announce the order, say for example, the bishop can put his hands on the head of someone and says, I call you. I'm not going to call you. So I call you a deacon, right? So the laying of the hands, it's to appoint this person, right? But then you have to say something, because is he going to be a deacon or a priest or what? Right? So you have to say something. Psaltus, مثلا, call you Psaltus, Anagnostis, whatever, right? So it's two things. So now the Pope, when he did that, he's a bishop. All the rest is what His Holiness said or explained, that it's only the celebration, the liturgical celebration. But the essence of the ordination is the laying of hands and that announcement of his order. Then he's a bishop. Then His Holiness says, I have not cried or wept in my life as much as I wept that night. Why? Can you imagine someone who lived in total solitude for many weeks without seeing anybody, to someone who has to meet people every day, many people? And he said, my life changed from becoming a monk to becoming a bishop much more than my life changed when I became a patriarch. Because from a bishop to a patriarch, you still meet a lot of people, but maybe you have more responsibility, right? But as a bishop, from a monk, this is the big difference. But His Holiness, until the last day of his life, truly remained a monk. And being bishop or patriarch did not change him. He was really a very simple man. You know, if they got him gifts of many kinds and very expensive, but he preferred to always wear the leather cross, right? He had so many gifts given to him, but he always preferred the leather cross. He could have held, like many other patriarchs or bishops even in other churches, golden crosses or gold peons, but he always preferred a wooden cross and the leather, the hand cross and the leather neck cross. His food was, I didn't know how he lived, because he ate very little. We give him many variety of food because we didn't know what he likes to eat. So we give him so many kinds to choose from. And then he would only take very little from one kind. That's it. Very ascetic. And as you all know, that he liked to spend a few days every week in the monastery, even when he was patriarch. And that's when we spent time with him, us two, and also at one time the four of us were together in the monastery. Amba Angelos went to the monastery in 1991. In 1990. Amba Suriel 1991. I went to the monastery in 1992. Father Mauritius 1993. So almost 1 year difference between each person. But it was a blessing to spend time with His Holiness. He slept very little. So he would come very late at night. Sometimes he had to write some articles, and then he would wake up very early. To work more. And that's why what some people said, His Holiness never rested in his life. Maybe now for the first time he understands what it means to rest. Finally. Because he really never rested. Not even one day of his life. The last night, which was Friday the 16th, or actually very early, morning, at dawn, 3-4 a.m. He was in his bedroom with his Amba Annis, Amba Armeya, and Father Bolus. And then he held their hands. He actually asked to hold their hands. And then he said, "Who are all these people around me?" Then Amba Yohannes said, "Your Holiness, this is your children, Yohannes, Armeya, and Bolus." He said, No, I don't mean that." So apparently he saw something. He saw some people, because he said, "Who are all these people around me?" So as if God was preparing him. These are the spirits of the saints who came to take his spirit with them. He was in a lot of pain in the end, because he had many. He suffered from many diseases in the end, and he was really suffering in the end. And he looked at the cross and then said, the monk that was with him, he said to him, "Your Holiness, is there anything wrong with the cross?" Because His Holiness was looking at the cross for nearly 15 minutes, he says. Then His Holiness said, "No, there's nothing wrong. I am speaking with Him, with Christ." And then His Holiness continued, "Maybe you wonder what I'm telling him." And then he said, "Yes, Your Holiness." He said, "I am telling him, as Saint Macarius said, I have no more power. That's enough." Because he was really in great pain in the end. And God listened to him, and He gave him rest that same day. Ethan, I think it's time now. So His Holiness, on the 31st of January of this year, he had a dream. Did you hear that one? He had a dream that he was walking with Moses the prophet. So when he woke up, he started to tell them about the dream. He said, "I was walking with Moses last night." And he said to them, "Do you know how the Red Sea parted?" It's not when Moses extended the rod, but it was when Moses actually started to walk. So every time he takes a step, the Red Sea, the water starts to go to the sides. And as they walked, then starts to open. And then they looked back, and then started to close again. So following day, can someone check the date is 1st of February. Is it a Wednesday? Can someone check that quickly? So the next day there was the weekly lecture of His Holiness. It is? Okay. So the story is accurate. So His Holiness started on that day to speak about trusting in God. And then he said, from the dream that he had, he said, in our life we have to trust in God. Trust in His promises. So if God promised him that the Red Sea will be split, then don't wait until it's split, because God said that it will be split. Start walking, and God will fulfill His promise. That was the title of that lecture, how to trust in God. And he explained to the people how Moses actually walked in the sea but no one knew that he had a dream the night before about that. I personally believe that His Holiness is a saint. And I have heard many miracles that He has done. And I am sure that He will do a lot of miracles. We all want to ask for His prayers on our behalf and for His intercessions. And we are actually preparing a place down the stairs. If you go down the stairs here, we have a saint's room in the end. But we open that area to, we'll have many articles that His Holiness used, such as his liturgical vestments, and we'll get his crown, his staff, and many things that he used to put it in a sort of a museum that people can go inside and take a blessing and say a prayer. So we are doing that now. Maybe, hopefully, within a couple of weeks it will be ready. It's not His Holiness's words. It's read in every, it sits in the prayer service for any patriarch. But many people thought that His Holiness wrote it, and it's nice. But His Holiness didn't really write it. Did you hear about the story of this piece? How many didn't hear about it? Raise your hand so I see you. So, how many heard? Yeah, and a lot of people heard. I don't know how all these people heard about it. Can I say it for the sake of the people who didn't hear it? So, on the day of the funeral, I really wanted to bring something back as a blessing for you, because I took a great blessing myself by being in the funeral and taking His Holiness's blessing. So I said I wanted to bring something as a blessing, and then I thought, how when the patriarch departs, then they put in his hands his cross that he used to use. So I said I will take the cross and I put another cross. With permission, not without permission. But I didn't have another cross, so I couldn't do it. So I said, what else can I do? Then there was no chance, that's it. Until we went to the monastery and we did the burial and everything. So on the way out, that man was carrying the casket, and khalas, we're going out. So he stops me and says, can you give me an absolution to take this piece? He said, while I was holding it, it came out of the casket. I said, show me. So he gave it to me. He said to me, can I keep it? No, so I said, I can keep it. So he goes, can I at least take a piece? I said, okay, you can take a piece. So this piece, can you see it? He took that piece, and I took the rest. He was happy, I was happy. And I said to myself, because it was, how many bishops were there and how many people were there? So many people. So why does he ask me? I felt that His Holiness really wanted to bring something to you, because this is what I wanted. And I said, no one has a piece of the casket, right? This just came out. So it's really a great, because I have crosses for His Holiness that downstairs. I have everything. I have some of his clothes. I have everything, but I don't have a piece of the So this is a really blessing. So it will be put in the room downstairs. But if you want, you can take its blessing today as well. Okay, our time is up. Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Your Grace. All right, so now we had originally scheduled a question and answer session, but that looked like it was kind of a question and answer session already. So we can take 5 minutes. If you guys have any other questions that you want to ask Sienna, maybe write them down or think about them. We also have some questions that came in over email before the meeting, so we can ask those to His Grace. Then we'll come back, we'll watch the videos. we have one video prepared, and then after that video we can ask His Grace either any questions, again related to His Holiness or related to Paradosis.
Someone asked me, did His Holiness nominate himself for the Patriarchate? Let me tell you, who knows when His Holiness became monk? What's the date of his consecration as a monk? You know? July 18th, 1954. Okay? July 18, 1954. On that day, there was a bishop who said to the people sitting with him, today our patriarch became a monk. Do you know when His Holiness became patriarch? November 14, 1971. So that event took place 17 years and 4 months before His Holiness was chosen for the Patriarchate. Are you following, or do you understand what I'm saying? 17 years before he became Pope, one of the saintly bishops prophesied. He said, today our patriarch became a monk. Okay? So, you know how I am. I don't believe anything unless I really know it's true. So I went to His Holiness one day when he was in Cleveland, and then it was quiet. So I said, Your Holiness, I heard a story, and I want to confirm that it is a true story. So I said to him, did one of the bishops prophesy that you will become patriarch? And he said, today our patriarch became a monk. His Holiness said, it is true. And then he told me his name. His name is Metropolitan Benjamin of Dumyat at that time, of Munufiyya. And then he added that on another day after His Holiness became a monk. So on the day he became a monk, he said that. But maybe sometime later, His Holiness was walking. He was going to visit, Abuna Abdul Masih, the Ethiopian. He loved him. His Holiness loved him because he was a true monk, very ascetic, and he was a true monk. So His Holiness loved him, and apparently they used to live close to each other. So His Holiness was going to visit him. And then on the way, that bishop was sitting with some people in Deir el-Baramos, the monastery of el-Baramos. So he pointed to him and said, do you see that monk? He will become our Pope. You see how great our church is? Full of saints. So you don't read about saints, مثلا Saint Antonius and Saint Cyril, and in every generation there are saints. We have Pope Kyrillos. We have Pope Shenouda. I want to tell you that please report to me any miracles that happens to you by the prayer of His Holiness. But you have to write what happened, and you have to bring evidence. Evidence means so someone met with me just before I came up, and he told me that he had MRI on his back, and he had problems with the back that gave him problems in his right leg. And then he said through the prayers of His Holiness, and he was healed. But I said to him, I want you to go and make another MRI and bring both, the one before and one after. And bring doctor's report that this can only be done through a miracle, that the medicine does not explain that. because we have to document. We don't just say a miracle happened, you know. Sometimes we exaggerate. You know, His Holiness was once distributing pens which had his picture on the top of the pen. So one lady saw that and said, "It's a miracle! His Holiness appeared in the pen." كل حاجة كده. Sometimes when we exaggerate, we lose the real thing. Right? So, if you know of anything real that happens, that come because hopefully by the time we can gather many and as children of His Holiness Pope Shenouda, hopefully we can produce some books of his miracles that happened with us here, because I feel that His Holiness will always serve the church. He will not stop serving the church, will he? Right? He will serve the church in a new way. He will always be with us, with his children, helping us in many ways. Okay? You want to hear a miracle done by His Holiness during his life? I'll just tell you one. I know many, but I will just tell you one today. Maybe I'll tell you more another day. So, there was that man who didn't like His Holiness. And he said, you know, Pope Kyrillos is a man of prayer. Pope Kyrillos is a man of miracles. What did Pope Shenouda do? We never heard that Pope Shenouda did any miracles. That's what he thought. And he didn't like Pope Shenouda. But then he had a relative who really loved Pope Shenouda. And then one day, they had a baptism, that family. On that night, just before the night before the baptism, the man who loved His Holiness had a dream. So he saw that His Holiness was coming in the room, into the baptistry, and then he called that man who didn't like him and said, "Can you put on my socks for me? You know, the white socks that we wear during the liturgy? Tillig بنسميه." So that man, he said, "Yes, you dream about His Holiness because you love him." So they go to the church, and then usually when His Holiness is baptizing, there are many children, because he doesn't just go for one. You know, he likes to gather a few at a time, because not every time when someone wants him to baptize, you know. So can you imagine, مثلا 5 or 6 babies, and everyone has at least 10 family members? So you can imagine at least 50, 60 person in the room. Then His Holiness goes inside the room and then chooses among the people that person who didn't like him. And then he asks him to, "Can you put on my socks for me?" So he said, that man was crying, because now he realizes the holiness of Pope Shenouda. How could he? By the way, I personally have never seen Pope Shenouda asking anyone to put on his tillig for him. Never. قدسك شفته قبل كده? Yeah. So to ask a total stranger who never met him and to pick him out of all these people, this shows you that he wanted to give him a message, a special message. See? Right, what's next?
So right now, while Sinna is going to go look at some of the questions while he's reviewing the questions, and if you guys want to send up more, while he's doing that, while His Grace is doing that, we're going to show you guys a video. The video is just essentially a few of the youth we had, if you guys maybe saw on Facebook, we had asked you guys to record yourselves on your cell phones or on your computers and to say something nice about His Holiness or a personal story about His Holiness, and then we put them all together, and we wanted to share that video with you. So while this is playing again, feel free to send up more questions. And also, if you have not signed your name and email, please sign your name and email. If that book is done, please give it to Dina. Dina, raise your hand. Over there. Okay, thank you.
think there are a lot of things you can talk about when it comes to His Holiness. You know, he was an educator, he was an author, he was an evangelist, but to me, most of all, he was a father. You know, anyone who had any kind of interaction with him, whether it was just like taking a blessing from him at the Makar, or just being in his presence, or listening to one of his sermons, you know, you immediately felt like one of his children.
Pope Shenouda affected me in many ways. I was a very big fan of Pope Shenouda's poetry, especially Qalbi al-Khafaq and Anta Lam Tunsit. I remember in the 4th grade I went to learn Qalbi al-Khafaq on the piano, and till this day I keep playing in remembrance of him. His quotes and sayings were very, very, very deep, and I always used to read them whenever I was upset. He was an amazing shepherd, one who cared about his church and about his people more than about himself. May God repose his soul in the paradise of joy.
The one thing that will always resonate in my memory is Sayyidina's laughter. He would share jokes and stories and would always laugh and smile, filling the room with his love. The youth were very important to him. He would sit with us even after long days of meetings and errands up until 2 o'clock in the morning, never turning us away.
We know that he has a very, very large sense of humor, and I wouldn't have enough time to sit down and share half the things that he would say when he would visit us in the Makarba. One thing I do remember is that there was a child that he would play with, and he would tell the child, "Inta walad halw," and then the child would tell him, "La inta walad halw." So that's one thing that I remember about him, is that he loved children, and his sense of humor was enormous and captivating. So now we have Saint Pope Shenouda to intercede on our behalf.
His laugh, his smile was always contagious. He always made the people around him laugh. And he even loved that. He said, you know, one of his jokes is like he couldn't stop laughing. When he wanted to stop something, when he became monk, he couldn't stop laughing. And that even in the worst times or the hardest times, he would always say a joke to lighten the mood. He said, don't let the problem or the situation take over you.
My one main memory of His Holiness goes back to an encounter I had with him during one of his visits in the late 1980s at St. Mary's in Brunswick. As usual, he had quite a number of bishops that accompanied him, and on this occasion, one of those bishops was His Grace Ambassadors from the Port Said, Port Fouad area. Ambassadors knew my grandparents quite well because of some work that my grandfather did in the Port Said, Port Fouad area, namely building a couple of churches in the area. My mother and I had spoken with Ambassadors earlier that day, and Ambassador said he wanted to arrange for His Holiness to come meet us. So while we were at church that day, while His Holiness was there, and I guess towards the end of the day, we were standing in the back of the church, and His Holiness was walking out with everybody, and Ambassador stopped him, whispered something in his ear, and His Holiness got that, you know, very sincere signature smile of his, and he ended up waving my mother and I over. Told my mother that he was very appreciative of the work that my grandfather did. He thought very highly of him, and then he proceeded to give us a blessing. And I think it's definitely by far one of those memories that my hope will last for the rest of my life, if not longer. And while, you know, it's been repeated plenty of times, I think it can't be said enough that we're definitely going to miss His Holiness. And at the same time, we're very appreciative of the fact that we're going to have somebody continuously praying for us and interceding on our behalf.
We are very lucky here in New Jersey and the East Coast to have seen the Pope many times, and some of those experiences or memories will last with me forever. Whether it's Tizbaha all night and then a very small intimate group sitting with the Pope, or whether it's an 8-hour drive out to Ohio to see the Pope, even for a brief moment. That's what His Holiness did. He gathered us all together, and He built memories and fellowship for us and for all our friends and the youth in the area to get together. We would drop whatever we're doing just to go see His Holiness, and that's something that will stick with me forever.
Just to share one story, we went to Egypt once, and His Holiness we were blessed to be able to sit with him for a little while in the Abbaseya. And beverages came out, and I went to go open his can of soda for him. And when I opened the can of soda for him, he did this. And it was really funny. And he asked me how old I was, and I told him, I think I was in college. I told him I was 21. And he laughed, and he goes, I'm 60 years older than you. And we all laughed. And it's something like, it's a non-story. It's like really, nothing happened. But it was just really, for me, really sweet, and really, like, I felt very special, and I felt instantly like his child. And I still feel special because of that. And I know a lot of people have stories with His Holiness like that. And I think that's because he loved us so much. And that's why we love him so much, because he loved us so much.
What I loved about His Holiness was that he was a man that probably never regretted any word that he said. If you noticed during question and answer or a conversation, that he would take about 10 seconds in silence before he would answer, whereas we would jump to answer right away. This really showed his wisdom, and that he would pray right before he would answer a question. And it showed that he really abided by the words that Christ said, that we would have to give an account for every idle word that we would speak.
He was always very wise, but very simple. He had like the innocence of a child, and I think that like irradiated in the room, and it was just so, that's what drew me to him the most, I think. He always reminded me of the verse that said, whoever takes the lowly position of a child, or of this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. It was just making a quality about him. I learned so much from him.
Well, the way His Holiness affected me personally was two things. One, it's the way he established all the churches throughout the world, especially in America. Like when I travel, I can go to any place in the country pretty much and attend church. And secondly is the way he ordained youthful priests for us, especially in this area, that really affected me personally, and have really, without some of the priests in this area, it would be hard to be where I am right now. So I think His Holiness for that.
The one thing that I truly love about him, and the one thing that I pray I too could gain, is the love that he had for everyone. That someone who was born without parents could look at you and make you feel so loved in this world.
When I was, I think, like 4 years old, he visited the Dallas church, and somehow I found myself, like, I was sitting at his feet, but he took me on his lap, and and could be and like, he made me feel like I was like the most special girl ever, and that till now, I remember as if it was yesterday. Like, I remember what I was wearing, I remember everything, and even to the point where he came back to Dallas to visit again, like a couple years later, and I insisted that I told my parents, like, I have to go see him because I know he's going to be so happy to see me, and I thought he would remember me by name. All of this because he took me on his lap and made me feel like I was really like his little daughter, and that was something that I loved about him so much. And because of that memory that I have of him, I'm so confident that he's in heaven, and I know that he is praying for me by name, and like all of us by name. And yeah, he's just a wonderful, like, good dude. I love him.
One thing I really liked about His Holiness is that he had this combination of intellect and compassion. And I think if you take a look around, you're going to see that that's a very, very rare combination.
My most memorable time with the Pope was when I met him in 99 or in 2000. No, in 99. And I was a senior in high school. And I asked him if Way was Siomi. And he said yes.
One of the things I admire most about His Holiness was his ability to make jokes and laugh, even in the face of tribulations and hardships and all the stresses that he had to deal with as Pope. He used to say that a day that he didn't laugh, he didn't count as a day that he lived. And I think that's something that I took away from his life. With all my little worries or whatever, I remember how much he had to put up with, and it kind of gives me something to look up to.
He has such a unique way of really making everyone feel very special and very loved, and has like a really great way of just reaching out to every single person in a way where, I don't know, it's very tailored, like very Christ-like, how Christ really like made a point to just meet every single person and be very personal with them. I don't know, like a couple of years ago, he came and he visited the Muqad, and it was January 26th, and I'll never forget this day because, I don't know, I'm so weird, but I definitely think that he was there for me. Yes. January 26th at night, we were praying to Baha with Amir Anas, and we got word that His Holiness had rested, and he was ready to meet with us and sit with us downstairs in the quarters. So we had went downstairs and we were waiting for His Holiness to come outside, and around like 11:20, 11:30, time's passing, and then all of a sudden 11:59, we hear Abu David come outside from the doors, and he said, "Okay, everyone calm down, everyone quiet down, His Holiness is going to come out, he's going to sit with us." Midnight exactly, His Holiness comes outside, and like he sits down, he takes his chair. Midnight on January 27th, my birthday. He came out for me. It was for me. I promise it was for me. Nobody else agrees with me, but I mean, I know it was for me, and so does he. And for sure, he knows me by name, and I don't know, I'll forever be grateful for everything that he's done for the church and for us as his children. And I ask if he remembers us before God in his prayers, and just continues to love us the same way that he did, but just continue to love us always.
When I was a little 4-year-old kid, my parents wanted to ordain me a deacon. So one day, Bishop was coming to our church in Jersey City. My parents got me into it, and they said, "Sam, let's go, you're going to get ordained, you're going to be a deacon, you know, woohoo." But I said no, and I insisted that nobody would ordain me deacon except for the Pope. Now, just to put this in perspective, this is back in 1990, and the Pope had never made a trip to the U.S. and had never come to our area ever. So to wait for the Pope to ordain me a deacon might have taken God knows how long. But I insisted, my parents didn't force me, and then in about 1990, he came, he visited a church in Jersey City, and he ordained me deacon.
We hope that we could be a fraction of the man that he was, and I encourage all the youth to read his books and listen to the sermons that we're blessed to have and hear, and just continue doing the things that he told us to do and follow his advice.
I really want to touch on his innocence, his simplicity, his innocence, and how I just felt like he himself was like one of the children, and how he had the heart of a child. And this is, when I looked at him, I didn't just see a pope or a patriarch. This is what made me feel like he was as if he was my grandfather, my own personal grandfather. Even though I haven't had as many encounters with him as others have, or I haven't had, like a close personal relationship with him. But this is what made me feel like I do have a personal relationship with him. It's his ability to be just as one of the children. It's such a Christ-like quality, and it's something that I strive for, and I hope that one day I can also be like him. And I'm happy now that I have him as an intercessor, and now I actually can have a very close personal relationship with him.
Of course, I learn a lot from the life of His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, as do all of us. But one thing in particular that stands out for me is His Holiness's emphasis on defending the true Orthodox faith that Christ gave us through His apostles and the fathers and the blood of the martyrs. His Holiness was always ready to stand up against any heresies, no matter how nuanced or subtle they were. He always had the light of the true faith in his eyes and in his heart and on his lips, ready to be spoken out courageously and boldly. And he even knew the teachings that were in different schools and with different people. And when I decided to study theology, the reason I chose this particular school is because it had his stamp of approval. And for him to know the specific teachings taught at specific schools in America was astounding and very inspirational. and we pray that God give us the same spirit to study and to understand and to defend the true faith.
So a personal story that affected me about His Holiness Pope Shenouda was in 2007 when I was returning from Africa. I had the blessing of riding on the same plane with him, and I got to sneak up into his first class area and talk to him for a little bit. And I remember I was talking to him about my mission trip to Africa and just the whole campaign of evangelism and mission in the U.S. and His Holiness was like so supportive and so happy when I spoke to him about it. And one thing that resonates in my head was he said that when you're serving, just make sure that your cup is always being filled on a daily basis. And he was encouraging me to just spend time with God on a daily basis in order to pour out to others and be able to witness to them effectively. He was always supportive of youth and always encouraging, and His Holiness was just such a big blessing to us.
Whenever I remember His Holiness Pope Shenouda III, I remember a modern-day church father. His ascetic life, his command of scripture, his knowledge of church history and dogma, it reminds me of one of the giants of old, like Saint Athanasius. Whenever His Holiness would speak or write, he would do so with great wisdom, with authority, and with love. And this love he continually demonstrated to us through his weekly meetings which he would conduct regardless of his health, and through the innumerable bishops and priests which he ordained for the church. And as a true servant of God, he labored tirelessly so that the schisms of the church may be healed. When Pope Paul VI of Rome invited His Holiness to the Vatican, it was the first time since 451 AD that the Alexandrian and the Roman Patriarch met. It was from 451 AD to His Holiness Pope Shenouda III. And I would just like to conclude with a contemplation I remember from Father Antonius Tenders, contemplating on the plan of the Lord for the church. He said that when the church was spiritually immature and had a weak faith, the Lord granted us Pope Kyrillos VI. And then when we matured, the Lord granted us His Holiness Pope Shenouda III to further nourish our minds and our hearts. And I am confident that the Lord will again grant us the Patriarch that we need the most in the times to come.
His smile, His wisdom, and His encouragement will always be with us. And now we have another saint that can intercede on our behalf. He'll be missed.
We can always learn from His Holiness that he was ready. He was ready to go. And instead of focusing on what miracles he did or how he lived his life, we should learn from his life to know, like, we have to be ready now. We have to work on ourselves to maybe go meet him, and then we'll have that personal story, that personal relationship with him up in heaven, hopefully.
And so I guess we just want to conclude by saying that we love you, and we can't wait to see you soon.
Yeah. Please pray for us.
I know it's time to end our meeting now. We scheduled it for 8 o'clock. But they are asking me to entertain you for another 10 minutes until the food arrives. So we have a few questions. And by the way, don't leave, because we prepared the pictures of His Holiness with a piece of his handkerchief that he used as a blessing. And for those who came a little bit late, I told you, those who were here in the beginning, that this is biblical, right? Because it says in that St. Paul's handkerchief healed the sick and cast out demons. We say that in the Apostles' Fast as well, in the fraction. His aprons and handkerchief healed the sick and cast out the demons. So anything that His Holiness used now is a blessing. And of course during his life it was also a blessing, but now it's more of a blessing. So if you have faith, I'm sure that you can see a lot of wonders. So we'll give you this in the end, and you can also take the blessing of that piece from the casket. I will answer these questions very quickly, because by the time we give out the pictures, it will take 10 or 15 minutes. There are many people. This morning at liturgy, there was a young boy leading with whom I've served. I felt that this boy was showing huge tendencies of pride, which bothered me because of my own experience with this sin. I voiced my opinion to his priest because the priest was not familiar with him, and asked the priest to watch over him. Is this wrong? Is this judgment? I wish that we understand what's the meaning of judgment. To judge a person is to say that this person is bad. But it all depends on your intention. If your intention is to better that person out of your love for him, then it's not judgment, right? Do you understand the difference? If your intention is good, because you love this person and you want him to be a better person, then you are not judging him, because you really love him. You're doing that because you love him. Okay? But if it's for another reason, then this is when it becomes a sin on your part. Sayyidina, can you please comment on how His Holiness balanced his ascetic life and practices with his responsibilities and still keep such a strong personal and emotional connection with each of his children? You have seen some people that spoke, and I don't know how they had such experiences with His Holiness. You feel that His Holiness had personal experience or touch with every person that spoke. He had that kind of character that he can even give you a look and you feel that you're so special, right? Because he was full of love. As I told you, that His Holiness used to spend a few days during the week in the monastery to feed himself spiritually for his own spiritual growth. He had some time during the day for his own prayers and spiritual growth. So he was not swallowed up with his responsibilities. He always balanced, and he always knew how to budget his time properly. And he didn't need to sleep much. But this is not for everybody, because sometimes we need 7-8 hours to sleep. But His Holiness maybe slept for 4 hours, and that was enough. But for the rest of the day, he was working. I remember Amba Angelus used to say, I wish I can be like His Holiness, because he has never seen him doing nothing. He was always doing something. He was very active during the day. He could do a lot. He could accomplish a lot because he didn't waste time. One thing to learn from His Holiness is how we can use our time properly. Because sometimes we waste a lot of our time. That's why we don't produce much, because we have a lot of time wasted. So, His Holiness really knew how to make good benefit of his time. Does the Coptic Church have a process to call someone a saint? For example, does a certain number of years have to pass prior to declaring someone a saint? As in the Catholic Church, we don't have a specific number of years in the Coptic Church, but we need enough time to pass before we can declare anyone a saint, so that we make sure that his memory is not forgotten by time, and to give God a chance to declare him as a saint by showing us signs and miracles that this person does after his life. So if the people still remember him because he's still working, So this is the way God would be showing that this person is really a saint. As in the case of Pope Kyrillos, for example. You know, it has been more than 41 years now since the departure of Pope Kyrillos. So hopefully soon the church can announce Pope Kyrillos as a saint, because I think this is enough time and he has done so many miracles. So. Are there any books that are completion of His Holiness Pope Shenouda's poem translated in English? You cannot translate poems from one language to another. You know, if you translate it, they lose the meaning. But you can translate them to understand what the words are saying. But you cannot translate a poem. It doesn't work. But I don't think that anything exists in English out of His Holiness's poems. But some of them have become spiritual songs that we use in our meetings. Many of them. I don't know if you know any. Can you tell us anything about your meeting last Tuesday in Egypt about the selection of our next Pope? The process of selecting a new Pope is very complicated. It takes very long. It's not like the Catholic Church. The cardinals gather together and then they make a vote and then they decide who they want. In our church, it's a combination between our will and God's will. Okay? So what happens is, within a week from the departure of the Pope, the Holy Synod has to meet to appoint what we call the locum tenens, who is the acting patriarch. Is acting on behalf of the patriarch until we select or we elect a new patriarch. And that happened in the first week. You know who is now the locum tenens, right? What's his name? His Eminence, Metropolitan Bohemius, who is the second oldest Metropolitan, because the oldest one is Amba Mikhail in Upper Egypt, in Asyut. He never attended. Actually, he was, when he was ordained? 1940s. Even Pope Shenouda was a layman at that time. And he's on his own. He never attended any of the Holy Synod's meetings. So anyway, so we all voted and all the bishops agreed to appoint Metropolitan Bohemius. He's the second oldest, I mean not oldest in terms of age, but at least in terms of ordination. Amba Bohemius, he's the Metropolitan of El Bahira and Marsa Matruh and Libya, 5 Pentapolis, etc. And then within 2 months the nominees start to the bishops and the general council of the church gather and they start to nominate bishops or monks. So any bishop or any monk who gathers 6 names becomes a nominee. You have to have at least 6 people, 6 bishops or 12 laymen that nominate you. Okay? And then you probably have a list of many names. Then we have a committee. This is what we did last Tuesday. We formed that committee out of 18 members. 9 bishops and 9 laymen from that general council. The responsibility is to come up with a final list of 5 to 7 names. So they start to investigate the names of the nominees, exclude some of the names that the criteria don't fit them. Okay? And then their names will be written in the newspapers, the national newspapers, so that everyone will read the names. So that anyone who has anything against any of the nominees has to come and say, this cannot be a patriarch. And he has to say why he thinks this person cannot be a patriarch. Right? Because we want the patriarch to be blameless. You understand? So they announce the names. At that time, they have a final list. That final list cannot be less than 5 and cannot be more than 7 names. And as I said, it could be bishops or it could be monks. Then there will be a vote. The vote, who has the right to vote? 12 members from every diocese all over the world. Okay? So any bishop has to select 12 wise people from his diocese. And the reason why not everyone has the right to vote, because we want the people that vote understand that this is very great responsibility and they are choosing the next pope. So not everyone who doesn't know anything about anything to just go and write any name, right? So people who are aware of what the church system, etc., to really make the right selection. So 12 from every diocese, 72 from Cairo, 24 from Alexandria, and many, probably I'm not sure the number of priests. But طبعا all the Holy Synod, all the members of the Holy Synod have the right to vote. Then after the election, they will take the highest 3 names that will take the highest votes. The 3 names will be put on a box, each name in a box, small box, sealed. Then we'll pray a liturgy. After the liturgy is prayed, then we bring little child, blindfold him, he cannot see anything, and then he has to choose one of the 3 names, and this will be the new patriarch. Okay? The process takes not less than 4 or 5 months, because if you think 2 months, and then they start to cross out some of the names, and then put it in the newspaper for not for 1 or 2 days, for I don't remember the exact number of days. But it's a long process just to make sure that the nominees are the best out of the best. Huh? They have been chosen. Huh? Yeah. I mean, it's not a secret, but I don't remember all the names now. But what I know is that the 9 names, they have decided not to nominate themselves and not to nominate others. Yani, to be neutral about it. No. There's no blank paper, just the 3 papers. It is a period for all of us to pray, because the patriarch is a very important position, and it is the father of fathers. So it's a time for all of us to pray about who God will choose. Any more questions about the election process? From the General Council. It's easier to get 6 bishops, because the General Council is 24, and the bishops, you have almost 90 maybe bishops, so it's easier to get 6 bishops.
So what if we want to nominate?
You can speak to your bishop, and then he will relay the message. Would it be possible for your grace to carry out our personal prayers and concerns as well as messages to His Holiness Pope Shenouda? Gladly. Bring anything you want. Next time I go to Egypt, I will bring it. But on the day of His Holiness's funeral, I put a paper in which I wrote many names of the people I know, and I put the names of all the congregation in the United States in general, because this was the only chance to while the thing was open. So by all means bring any papers. I will take them next time I go to Egypt. Last questions? So Mr. Yusuf, where is he? He's in charge of I'm the president of St. Mary and St. Augustine organization for helping our brothers and sisters in Egypt, the needy, in marriage or in those who don't have a decent place to live in. And we want some servants, young servants, to serve with us. So if you're interested, please speak to him after, and we'll see how you can help. Okay, Mr. Yusuf and also Mr. Ragai, they are both working with me in that organization. Okay. ايه رأيكم نصلي وتيجوا تاخدوا بقى صورة His Holiness? So I hope that all of you have written your names and emails, so we will let you know when the next time for the meeting is. Okay. كلكم كتبتوا? All of you? Anybody has not written their email yet? Huh? Few people missing. Please raise your hand if you haven't written your email yet. So all this section is done? Huh? Very good. Amin alleluia doxa batrika.